So this past week, I was invited to a high school to discuss spirituality and my beliefs, and I was so excited to go. But when I was walking into the school on the day of, I started to have all those old feelings of adolescence bubble up. Like, what if they don't like me? Or what if they think my clothes are dumb? Or maybe more importantly, what if they ask me a question about my beliefs that I just can't answer? I started my time in their class by sharing my story, which is that I'm someone who has actually really doubted Christianity. I had tons of tough questions, and through a process of looking for good answers, it actually brought me back around to believing with confidence that Christianity is actually true. And I think that went pretty well. When I was done, the teacher said, "Thanks, Matt. Okay, after class, feel free to go up to Matt and ask all your hardest questions." I feel like she really underscored that they should be questions that are really difficult to answer. And I felt that anxiety start to bubble up within me again. So the first student came up to me and said, "How do you know that God exists?" And I think that's a totally legitimate question. So I dove into the cosmological argument. If the universe has a beginning, then something must have caused that beginning, and it has to be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and incredibly powerful because it exists separate from the universe. And she just kind of looked at me and was like, "Yeah, that sounds good, but I believe in God because this one time I went to church and I was really seeking God, and then the pastor spoke to me specifically and had something to say that spoke right to my heart, and that's why I believe that God exists." And I didn't expect her to say that, so I was a little surprised, but I thought in my head, you know what, she's right. You can know God through deductive arguments like the cosmological argument, but you can also know God by experiencing Him and having a relationship with Him. And then a second student came up to me and said, "You said that the universe had a beginning, but couldn't God just have a beginning as well?" And I started talking to him about the very nature of God being eternal. And I wondered if maybe it would go above his head, but it seemed as though he was really tracking with me. And at the end of our conversation, he said, "Yeah, I think that makes sense." And we agreed that I hadn't proven that God exists, but that the concept of God was coherent, that it actually made sense. And then this student said one other thing to me. He said, "Yeah, actually, my dad does believe in God, but he doesn't believe in any particular religion because he just feels like there's too many options out there, and how can you really know which one is true?" I've actually really wrestled with that question as well. And what I decided was that so many different worldviews have something to say about Jesus. Christianity does, and so does Islam and Judaism and Buddhism, and even atheists have an opinion on who Jesus was. I believe that if we understand who Jesus really was, then he might have something to say about all these different worldviews that have an opinion about him. All in all, my time in this class went really well. And I think it's because of this. I thought that these students wouldn't care about this topic, but I was totally wrong. They cared and they were really sincere in asking their questions, which I think is the first step in understanding what you believe and why. It's asking sincere questions and truly wanting to find an answer. If you're interested in learning more about anything I discussed in this video, you can find the links to those response videos down below in the description.